the data and what I was hearing from teachers. And let's see. So anything that's in quotation marks and in quotes, I think that those are quotes from teachers. And so when I put these together, they represent the perspectives of all 10 teachers that were in the studies. So I created these based on the interviews that I did.
Yes, this I think it's an important attempt to bring it to the writing this idea of intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is something, I don't know, Virginia, I'm talking about aesthetics.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did this coding, and then I did what Saldana called code weaving, or kind of writing, like memo writing. I called it memo writing at first. And then my doctoral supervisor said you should publish those because I'd written them for myself. And she encouraged me to actually include them in my dissertation. And so I did, and I've also published them in several journals now too. And I was a little surprised that, well, I was happy that they accepted them because it does look really different than what you'd expect in a journal article.
It is interesting because it produces like an affective movement in us, while you're reading it. So it's interesting because it pulls us to the text,
Yeah, and that was my intention, is trying to create kind of an effective mood, and then knowing that everyone who reads it will interpret it potentially in different ways as well, which is the point. But sometimes it's challenging, and I was telling Beth this earlier, that when I submit these to journals, the peer review often wants me to explain it to them. And I do a little bit sometimes because I want my articles published, but that's not the intention. The intention is that it is a bit of an interruption, and it's meant to be. Like, stop, take some time, think about it. It not everything is going to come easy, but yeah, that's the intention.
Okay, so I was raising my hand. I'm sorry. So one thing that really interesting for me is not only your work, of course, which is very interesting, but also how the existence of your work impacts the academic field in general. Because if you submit and people are not used to, but it's a common sense that all of us, we have different ways of learning and also different ways of studying and and thinking about stuff. So if you produce something that makes this kind of information or process data, which can be boring sometimes, let's face it, because paperwork, government, blah blah blah. And what you're doing through this aesthetic, can I say that? I can say that is pulling people that normally wouldn't have the contact or the appealing to your work, just because we learn different, and sometimes it gets too tense or too dense. And what you do is, like, you're calling more people, you're drawing attention to what you're saying, and you're creating more layers. So people who cannot, like, have adherence, contact with the text can learn through, the PowerPoint or the schemes and stuff like that. And it's interesting when academia doesn't, the academic in general doesn't accept that naturally, because we keep writing about it, but when it comes to practice, they say, "Oh no, wait, there's something weird here. Is it weird what you're doing, or is it weird what we are doing, what we keep doing when we evaluate, this kind of work?" So it's very interesting how you point your gun to one point, but actually you're hitting a very wider target. You know, that's very.
Thank you. I like how you said that.
Anyone else?
I have just a question. There was a moment where you said that some teachers were like afraid to be part of the activism movement, you know, because they were afraid of losing their jobs and things like that. And I was wondering, I think you were talking about public schools, right?
Yes.
So the teachers in the public schools in Canada, are they public servants or are they not? They can lose their jobs like that or not? Because here in Brazil,
sorry, go ahead.
the teachers, we are kind of public servants. So for example, I am part of an activist movement. So it's okay, it's fine. I'm not going to lose my job because of it. It's just something that I was wondering. Just a question.
Including strike it's covered by law.
It's a right.
It's a right by law. The right to strike.
Yeah, we have the right to strike covered by law as well. However, the province next to us is called Alberta, and they were on strike last fall, just recently, and they were their right to strike was taken away from them by the government, and they were told to go back to work, or they would all be fined a certain amount of money, and so would their union. So unfortunately, because that just happened recently, and where my union's also going now back into bargaining again soon, that's something that's on our minds too, because when that happened, the premier of my province said that was a good idea publicly. So that's a concern. However, with respect to jobs and what that looks like, for the most part, I would say that most teachers who were involved, there's just this understanding, honestly. It's like a silent understanding that if you get involved with your union or you're too out there with your opinions, that you probably won't get promoted within your school division.
And we have a turning, like every 4 years, every a certain number of years, we have a voting, and the community choose their principal.
That's so
for
much
a while.
better, because then you have principals that teachers are choosing that will support them. And I have a principal who the school division knows will support them.
Well, it's also true that in some, much more common in the interior of the country, you have a lot of political, I don't know, intrusion into this. So there is some appointed principals by political power. But this happens usually in small cities.
I will say we do have some really good principals, but some of our principals, I think, are there because they're very agreeable, and they're not always supporting or taking teacher sides. They want to,
They're like in Brazil, when they're not elected. Some cities they are not elected. Roberto is remembering me. Some cities they are not elected, but then many times they are just appointed by the local power, local political power, and then it's just like friends of the governor, friends of the governor's wife, and stuff like that. But you don't have this kind of when you go on a strike, you don't have this kind of being afraid of losing something in our careers.
Yeah, ours is, we are afraid of being legislated back to work.
No, this we have here too. We are afraid of this too.
Yeah, and so last time we were taking job action, we did it in a way that we weren't just walking out indefinitely, because that would increase the risk of us being legislated back to work.
And this is part of your dissertation in the affect aspect, like this fear too?
Yes. Yeah, that came up. because I was only asking teachers who are very active and doing this work, it probably less so than other teachers, if I would have just interviewed everybody. But they talked about how they were strategic to alleviate some of those risks. So I know that some of the teachers were part of grassroots groups that were where they could be anonymous.
I'd like to ask her a question. I'm curious about the organization of the strikes in an aspect. In Brazil, strikes are usually associated with left-wing movements. Usually the right or far-right teacher. Does the teacher activism there follow a similar political cleavage?
Is this strikes like within a, or how do strikes work? Exactly.
For educational quality, I'm going to use the term quality here.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know what you're saying too. And if they don't, that goes against our code of collective interests. And they can also be punished or whatever, disciplined by our union if they don't
like everybody
participate.
votes?
It's not a required vote, but generally almost everyone votes. Over 90%, over 90% of teachers are typically voting. That's, I think, is the
biggest difference, because we have the unions, but the voters are just people that are there at that moment. We make a big meeting, a big assembly. Not everybody goes. And we have maybe a representation of 10% of the teachers there.
Oh, wow.
So the 10% decides for everybody. So that's why I think also this kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Because then many people don't go. Usually the people that go to the assemblies, even if they lose, they are on strike. But it's just that I have a great majority of people that are just silent.
Oh, yeah, ours is
that participate.
This is we have representatives in every school, or almost every school in our province, and so that person, well, we used to do it was on paper, and that person would check with every staff member to make sure they'd voted. You can't make somebody if they really say no, but I used to be that person when we were still doing it on paper about 10 years ago. And I think out of my school was quite large. I think we had about almost 75 or 80 teachers. And there were maybe only 3 that didn't vote.
But you cast a vote, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. Our Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. Now it's online.
Okay.
And so they send ballots. Yeah, they send out ballots to all teachers in the province, and typically, I think it was over 90% or just over 90% are voting. And so we did 95% voted in favor of sanctions. And then about 8 months later, we were still dealing with things, and they did a second sanctions vote to confirm that everyone was still on board, so that they could extend the strike mandate. And again, the second time, the same number of teachers voted yes. So they didn't lose any support. They still had 95% after 8 months. And I think it is quite incredible because this is across, like I mentioned, rural and urban communities in our province, that all teachers are sticking together in solidarity, which is quite impressive, I think. Because even though we have somewhat different contexts, we still have a lot of the same issues.
Okay, that's very different.
Yes, I will also mention, and I'm not sure how it works there, but like all teachers are required to teach at public schools, which are most of our schools are public schools, are required to be a member of our union.
I know, you know.
And that's in legislation. So it's not it's not voluntary.
Okay, so it's pretty different.
Yeah, and that's We were, I think, actually, from what I've read, is we were the first in North America, at least, to do that for teachers. So that's been since 1933, almost 100 years.
Yeah, so that's pretty different.
Yeah.
It's not that our teachers are not in a union. Most of them are.
Yeah.
The problem is that the voting is in a meeting. So you have an assembly, and people that are there vote. People that are not there don't vote, and not everybody goes there.
They should go online. Is that possible?
Yeah, it's gonna be hard.
Well,
Because also there is an attempt to control the union. So the controllers of the union don't want this kind of opening, because then everybody's gonna have voice. And not everybody in the union want everybody to have voice, which seems to be a little paradoxical.
That's the problem. That's probably why the union is not getting stronger.
Yes, that's it. That's a big trouble.
It's interesting.
Anything else? No, so I'm gonna just thank a lot, Trudy. I don't know, I cannot say her name pretty. She said it's pretty different.
Yeah.
Trudy, I'm gonna thank you a lot for being here talking to us, so that we could just like learn about your research. And we read the papers, like the articles, not the whole dissertation, but the articles. And I think it's incredible how many different references you put together in a very strong framework to make your analysis. And well, we thank you a lot for being here with us, and we keep talking. I think that people can email and do stuff like that, so that we can just keep in touch with everybody. I'm gonna keep in touch with you, like personally, but I think that we can also try to move forward, getting together with some people. I think Josie, that is reading more, the papers and everything, but then may want to talk to you a little more, like one-to-one. So just to discuss this idea of studying politics, like making a political analysis that has to do with affect, which is pretty not so common. And I would say, like, to discuss union is even less common. But I think it's a great possibility of discussion between you both. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here and staying with us. And tchau, gente. Boa noite.
Nice to meet you. I love